real versus personal property. So I would know absolutely know the definition of a fixture, of when that was personal property at one point, and then it becomes real property and stays with the house or commercial property, whatever it is that you're selling. So again, personal property, when it becomes attached for the purpose of being stayed, sorry, that wasn't proper English, of staying, then you want to know that that becomes real property. So heating and cooling units, carpet, flooring, cabinets, plumbing, your mechanicals, electrical wiring, outlets, light fixtures. Those are all permanently attached with the intention of functioning with the home. So when they showed up on in a box from Home Depot on your front door, they were personal property. But once they were installed, they became real property, known as a fixture. Land characteristics and legal descriptions. One, I would know the definition of a legal description, and that is what holds up in court, not your street address. Your street address is for parties, the post office, and an ambulance. Okay, a little more than that. But a legal description is really what you're selling or buying when a property is transferred. Then there are 3 types of land descriptions: meets and bounds, lot and block, and government or rectangular survey. And I would know the definitions of all 3 of those. Meets and bounds is what they use with the original 13 colonies. It uses a point of beginning or a monument as its, again, beginning point. And it's going to give a description of the entire edge of the property and return you to the point of beginning. It's going to use a lot of measurements, 100 feet. It might use latitude and longitude, but it's going to be a really long description, again, that starts you at some sort of point of beginning and tracks you around to that starting point. Lot and block is where we had Jeff come into, sorry, that's my code for Thomas Jefferson. Did that make it sound fun and cool? Anyway, sorry, that's government survey is Thomas Jefferson. That's where we started getting all these sections and townships. So I would know how that those are laid out, but most important for a section, I would know that that's a square mile. A square mile contains 640 acres or 43,560 square feet per acre. And then the lot and block, that is a recorded plat map. And everything's recorded. The lot size, the setbacks, any curve, where sidewalks go. It's all laid out on that lot and block. That's a plat, goes with a plat map. Number 2 is measuring structures and land measurement. I think that all goes into, again, that 640 or the 43,560 square feet per acre. The livable, rentable, and usable area. That one, I'm going to say length times width will give you the square foot of an area. Another good question that I think Christina asked this morning was front footage. So we know we've got 12 inches per foot, but front footage would be the width of the property. Then mineral, air, and water rights. Mineral is going to be subsurface. Typically is what they're referring to. Air rights is going to be that example that I gave you of the Canteen restaurant in Ottumwa, Iowa, that they didn't move their building. They just allowed the city to build up and over. They sold their air rights. And then water rights are going to be riparian or littoral. My guess is you're going to have a littoral question, which is lakes are larger. about a beachfront property, where is the actual property line for it? And again, it's at the high water mark. Encumbrances are going to be liens, easements, encroachments, and other potential encumbrances, which I believe what you really should put there is deed restrictions. Okay. Lien, that is a charge against a property as a security for a debt. So a mortgage, a mechanic's lien is another good one. A mechanic's lien would be, I put a new roof on my house and I didn't pay the contractor. So in order to recover the debt I owe to him, he'll put a lien against my property until that's paid and satisfied, and then he would release the lien. Otherwise, when I go to sell the property, I've got to satisfy that in order to transfer clear title to the next property owner. Now, when it talks about encumbrances on the exam with liens, you want it to be a specific lien. And a specific lien is something that attaches to the property. So that mechanics and mortgage lien that I just mentioned, those are specific liens, meaning they are specific to that address, 123 Main Street. They're specific to that house or that property. Where a general lien, such as a judgment, that does not rise to the level of an encumbrance. Judgment follows you wherever you go. You just have that as in general. And while it does affect title to your property, it's not a specific lien, it's a general. Easements, I know you got 4 types there. And an appurtenance is we're letting our neighbor use our driveway because they don't have driveway access, for example. Another one would be an easement in gross, which is for anything utility related, would be the keywords I would look for there. An easement by necessity, the keyword I would look for there is landlocked. We can't have any landlocked properties. And then an easement by prescription is when someone has been openly using our land without our permission for like a long time. And after a certain period of time, probably 10 to 20 years, depending on the state law around it, you're going to basically take an encroachment, which is when somebody put their fence line over onto your property accidentally, they didn't have the right survey done or something like that. They pour concrete for a driveway. It goes a little bit over into the neighbors. That's an encroachment. And after we let that go for a really long time, again, whatever the state law is, 10, 20 years, that's when it really becomes an easement by prescription. Types of ownership. I think that your 2 big rocks of this section are going to be tenants in common and joint tenancy. Joint tenancy can be married or unmarried couples, 2 or more. The key thing with that one is the right of survivorship. So if someone in that ownership group passes away, there's simply one less owner. So if brothers William, David, and Sam own that farm and Sam passes away, there's just simply one less owner. Now it's just Dave and William that own it. The other key one that I'll point out that I think is worthy for you to know to navigate the exam is joint tenancy is a way to avoid the process of probate when someone passes away. Because again, there's just simply one less owner. We don't need to go and find who the next owner is. Where with a tenant in common, we do. A tenant in common, again, if we had brothers, William, Dave, and Sam, if they owned a farm as tenants in common, which is what I would recommend for them, they would each own a portion of it. Okay, so maybe William owns 20 and Sam and Dave own 40% each. William can sell his 20% whenever he wants without the permission of the other two, but he can't sell the entire parcel. Then when William passes away, he's going to dictate who inherits that investment in the farm, his 20%. Maybe it's going to be his wife. Maybe it's going to be his kids. If he doesn't have a wife and kids, maybe he is going to leave it to his 2 remaining brothers, but that will be dictated either by his will or by state law on how they rule descendants. Tenants in common is great for investor partners. Joint tenancy is great for cohabitating, nesting. Those may not be the best descriptions, but I don't want to say married couple because it doesn't have to be married. It could be anyone that just, they want to live together, right? And if one of them passes, they want to make sure that the other one just naturally gets the property. Common interest ownership would be community property rights would be one. I don't know that that's going to be where you have it on the exam, even though I know that that's something that was in the book. I think for our exam here in Iowa, common interest ownership that they're going to address is going to be timeshares, condominiums, and co-ops. Those 3 run together on the exam a lot. A timeshare is going to be use of the property for a specific time. Timeshares happen a lot in areas where people maybe would invest in owning a second property. Has anybody ever been to the beach on Florida? There's people that usually just walk those beaches saying you'll get free beach towels if you come and listen to our presentation. They're usually selling timeshares in maybe a condominium looking complex, but you don't get that condo forever. You only just get it for 1 week a year for a set period of time. Vegas has gotten a lot of timeshares rolling now as well. Condominiums, again, it might look like an apartment style building, but you only own your unit, walls in, plus some common shared area that might be green space. It might be a mail room. It might be parking lot. And then a co-op is very similar to a condo in terms of lifestyle. What is different about it is how you own it. And you do not own your unit on a traditional deed like you do a condo. Rather, you own stock in a corporation, and in exchange for that, you get to live in your unit. Then ownership in severalty, that is one person. You've severed yourself off from the rest of the world. You own that property as one person. Then life estate ownership. There's going to be fee simple versus life estate ownership. Fee simple is your highest form of ownership in any estate. That means Amy Schaefer owns it. And for example, I've got a will that says my niece inherits it. Then my niece inherits it. She owns it. She can do whatever she wants with that property. Gift it, will it, sell it, however she wants. A life estate is going to be a little bit different, which means that my niece is maybe inheriting my property for the life of another. So I don't really want her to control it. I want my great niece to be able to control it when she's of age. She's only 1 month now. So she's not making any legal decisions. She's not signing any deeds yet, right? So look for the keywords of for the life of another. Our next section is land use controls and regulations. And in that modern real estate book, there's going to be a couple of chapters for you to get this information. One is going to be the one that talks about government powers, police powers. And then the other one is going to be the one that actually talks about zoning regulations. So government rights in land, they talked about police power, eminent domain, taxation, and a sheet, which again, I know we talked this morning, is like, oh, sheet, I didn't have my estate put together, and now I've died, and the state's going to take it from me because I didn't have a will and I don't have any heirs. That's ESCHEAT, a sheet. This, though, when it talks about special assessments, property taxes, I think that one's pretty clear. That's a charge on your property to pay the overall bill of your local municipalities, as well as your county and state. And you can go to your assessor's page, most of them, and see how your tax dollars that you pay on your property are broken down. And I know we've got a couple new homeowners that we have here. You can go to your county and see that. Polk County has it listed out, so you see how many of your property tax dollars went to schools, and long laundry list of things. So that's taxation on your property. Special assessment is a special taxation that usually comes from your city, and they usually charge specific homeowners a special assessment to cover a project financially that directly influences them. So for example, and I don't 100% know if this is how this is happening, but it would be an example of a special assessment. Windsor Heights, Iowa, along 73rd Street is getting sidewalks put in. They've had that major street running north and south between Hickman and, let's say, University is the main drag of it. They've never had sidewalks there. So they've gone through and they've put in sidewalks. A lot of cities would do a special assessment for all those homes then that the sidewalk is going through, because they're adding value in their eyes essentially to that property, but they maybe didn't have all the money in the city budget to cover it. So it's a special tax. Eminent domain is the government taking private land for public use. So eminent domain can happen very commonly with the Department of Transportation. They're taking maybe a 2-lane highway. They want to make it 4 lanes, which means all of the land up and down that side of the road, we now need to approach all those landowners and buy a little slice, the width of the highway to extend that. That would be a concept of eminent domain. And there's a lot of land acquisition companies that work in that regard. The process of how they do it, the verb that's attached to that is condemnation. So this is also then when we talked about police power. And again, police power is not the actual police. Police power refers to all the things that our city, state, and local governments do to keep our citizens safe. Now, yes, the police are the ones that enforce it. But these laws are put into place saying you can only drive 35 miles an hour on this street. They do that to keep you safe. They say, an occupancy. of a certain square footage can only hold X number of people. Again, they do that for safety, because especially right now, you've got 30 people living in a 500 square foot unit. That would be a COVID breakout for sure, right? We don't want that happening. So we've got occupancy limits. Then let's translate it to what you're going to be doing maybe in residential real estate or even commercial. When you're building structures, they're going to have details about how you build that for the safety. You know, what creates a load-bearing wall? How many feet apart must we have 2x4s so that the structure doesn't fall apart and harm anyone? That's all a part of government controls. It's a really big beast. Then with that is zoning. And they really want to create a zoning plan so that we're avoiding what I called earlier the Erin Brockovich situation. So if you've seen that movie, Erin Brockovich, you know that she helped an attorney try a case where we had residents living really close to a factory that used some sort of emissions into the soil for some sort of runoff for whatever product they made. That contaminated the groundwater, which was causing cancer cluster cells and brain cancer in those residents that lived in very close proximity to that factory. Now, typically when we zone, we don't want those close to each other. And in this instance, I think that they built that housing close because they were selling it on the premise that it was really inexpensive, affordable housing. Well, one, we did not maybe have the proper laws for that factory for them to be told by government powers, by police power, you can't just let anything run off into the soil because it will damage the groundwater. You got to dispose of that by law properly. That's the Department of Natural Resources sets a lot of those standards here in Iowa for us as well. Another part of it might have been that this city would not have allowed residential to be so close to something zoned commercial for that reason that they maybe would have put a buffer zone in there. Fill that up with a park or something else that would have buffed between that heavy commercial and residential. So that's why they've got those zoning laws, as well as, do you want to live right up next to a factory that makes noise 24/7? I think we would all be super sleep deprived potentially. So that's really why they set up those zoning laws. Building codes, again, are for safety. Now, we talked about deed restrictions under encumbrances with the last section. Those deed restrictions with an encumbrance that follows a property along, that's going to be set up with a development or homeowners association that says all the homes in this development must be a minimum of 1,400 square feet. They must plant 2 maple trees. They must have 20% stone on the front facade. A bunch of maybe restrictions like that. That is for conformity and integrity of that development, so that we don't have a mini mansion then with a tiny house next to it, because they would ruin each other's values. It's really done for the health of the neighborhood in terms of conformity and maintaining values. So it's architectural related. Building codes are safety related, and they are regulated by the city, where those deed restrictions are regulated by the homeowners association or the developer, whoever's in charge at the time. The city doesn't have anything to do with those deed restrictions, but they do have something to do with those building codes. That's why they issue building permits and then occupancy permits at the end saying, yes, this property is safe for someone to live in. Okay. Another great word, those private controls for deed restrictions. They're item C under land use controls. Another great term for you to know is those conditions, covenants, and restrictions. Those are CC and Rs. That's the packet you get when you buy one of these properties. Really common with a homeowners association with a condo that says maybe everyone's assigned 2 parking spaces, but no homeowners can park in visitor parking for more than one night at a time. You can have a dog, but it's got to be less than 25 pounds. Those rules of those CC and Rs, those covenants, conditions, and restrictions, really common with condos. Okay. Now we've got market value, valuation, and market analysis. This is the pretty fancy word for appraisals. And I would know the purpose. I would know the definition of an appraisal is an opinion of market value. I think that would be a great test question, is what does the appraisal establish? It's market value. There is a list of steps in the appraisal process. And while I think those are great for you to review, I think knowing the first one is the most important. And the step in the appraisal process where it starts is to define the problem. What is the reason that we're doing this appraisal? And is it, I think a good type for that is it being used for its highest and best use? So the example that I gave you is a 3-bedroom bungalow on 3 acres of land, surrounded by strip malls. When that 3-bedroom bungalow on 3 acres sells, we want to define the problem first. Why are we even doing this appraisal? Are we appraising it as a 3-bedroom bungalow on 3 acres? Or are we purchasing it to make more strip malls? We're putting up another Red Robin in town, right? Because how we do the research and value that, you know, as a 3-bedroom bungalow on 3 acres is probably not worth as much as it is now just for commercial development land. So we want to define that problem. Why is this purchaser purchasing? Now, when it talks about situations requiring an appraisal by a certified appraiser, this is most, I think, generally going to be the difference between an appraisal and a broker price opinion. So a broker price opinion is a much faster, smaller, probably cheaper version of an appraisal that's often done for a bank trying to establish a price when they list something that they've taken back through foreclosure. They can be used maybe for refinancing or a home equity line of credit. But a true appraisal is going to come whenever someone is purchasing and borrowing money. The lender wants that appraisal done to verify that a buyer isn't overpaying for a property, so that they're not upside down the moment that they close on a loan in terms of what they owe versus what the property is worth. There is a long list of economic principles and characteristics of value. Long list. What I think is important for you to know of that list is anticipation. So we're anticipating that the local factory is going to close. When's the best time to sell our property? And it's probably going to be now before that anticipation becomes reality. That could work opposite. Maybe we're anticipating Amazon coming to Bondurant, Iowa. So their values start to go up because demand is a little bit higher, knowing that we might have a new business opportunity and jobs to apply for coming. Yes. So I would know anticipation. Another really good one, I think, for you to know is the theory of supply and demand. When supply is low and demand is high, that's where we've got a seller's market and prices typically go up. When demand is low and inventory is high, the opposite, that's typically a buyer's market and sellers are going to see their price decrease. So for example, right now we're considered to be in a seller's market. We've got low inventory, high demand. You know, we're looking at maybe 3,400 listings for sale in Des Moines area where we maybe need 5,000 to 6,000. So inventory is low, demand is high. That's what's helping sellers achieve those higher price points, multiple offers, driving the price up. Now we've got 3 different types of establishing market value for an appraiser. One is sales comparison. The second one is cost approach. The third one is income analysis approach or income approach. Sales or market comparison. First of all, just in general of these 3, I would have a good working knowledge of when you'd want to use which one. Which one's going to have the most weight on determining the best market value price when you reconciliate an appraiser's findings. Sales works really good for residential because we've got a lot of inventory that's sold to pull as data. Commercial isn't as easy because let's say we sell a high V. There's only one high V in that community typically, and there's no other good comparables for it unless you've had a lot of turnover for a lot of grocery stores in town. Since there's not a lot of that plentiful market data, cost approach would be really good for it. And that's where we strip the property down to bare land. We add in the cost of new construction. And then we use a process of depreciation. We use a process of depreciation to establish the most likely market value for that property. And that depreciation is determined by functional deterioration, physical deterioration, and external obsolescence. So let's start with physical. That's the first one in the Modern Real Estate book. Physical is basic wear and tear maintenance, updating the carpet, painting the walls, giving it a little facelift. Functional obsolescence is when we've got maybe an office building where you've got to go through one office to get to all the other offices. So instead of 4 offices that you can go into each office versus a 4-office building where you've got to go through one to get to the others, those function very differently, correct? But and then external would be what's going on in the surrounding area. Is the parking lot hard to get in and out of? For example, they would use those depreciation factors to come up with that cost approach price. Now, income analysis approach, this is really good for unique properties that are rented. So this could be a big commercial building that is rented on a long-term lease. They maybe would use this approach to help determine. Cost would probably maybe be best, but maybe a 20-plex apartment building would be great. Maybe that unique mansion that they rent out rooms now as a bed and breakfast. So I would really look for apartment buildings or a unique rental for that income approach. And again, we're using, excuse me, future income to establish value now. So the net operating expense gets used with a capitalization rate to determine the value. And that's where I gave you that Wagner T, where we've got a T, and on top of the T, we put income. And then each of the other two spots, we put rate and value with a multiplier in between. That helps you determine that formula. Then selecting and adjusting comparables. Selecting comparables, I want you to focus on a comparable sale in the same neighborhood within the last 12 months. Not a foreclosure, because that's a distressed property. Not a sale that happened maybe between mother and daughter, because that's unique. And that daughter maybe very well bought that property for pennies on the dollar compared to what it's really worth. Those are unique sales. And you don't want to use another neighborhood within the last 6 months. You want to use your neighborhood 12 months. Then adjusting. We use this example, and I know I screwed it up when I tried to share it with you the first time. So let's take it from the top. A 3-bedroom home sells for $180,000. What's the most likely sales price for a 2-bedroom home with fireplace if we know a 3rd bedroom is worth $5,000 and a fireplace is worth $2,000? Then we're going to make an adjustment to the sold property, not the subject, not the 2-bedroom with fireplace. We don't make adjustments to the subject property, but we adjust the comparable sold.